Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Football Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. It is your host, Brice Lewis, back again for everything football. You know we do on these shows. We're going to go over the next week of predictions as we actually just recently finished up week 12. So we're going to be going into week 13 next week. We're going to talk about all the games, get my analysis and my predictions on those games. We actually had a game that was played, Pittsburgh and Baltimore, the last game of Week 12, played on Wednesday. We're going to discuss that game to kick off the show and my thoughts on both teams moving forward because they're both going in two different directions and both have major questions, even the Steelers, even staying undefeated. We're also going to get into biggest college football games in the week and then some general NFL news. So that's what we're going to be doing today on the podcast. Like I said, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of this experience with me, letting me be part of your day and everything of that sort. So, let's go ahead and get into it. So, we had the Pittsburgh Steelers defeat the Baltimore Ravens 19-14. Very low scoring game, very ugly offensive game. Definitely a very ugly offensive game. The Ravens led after the first quarter, and the Steelers were just able to make enough plays late to do what they had to do. RG3 pulled a hamstring in this game in the second quarter, really didn't do great at all through the air, but was effective on the ground. He pulled a hamstring in the second quarter. He was replaced by Trace McSorley later in the game. And basically, he said after the game that he felt like he let the team down. He felt like they could have beat the Steelers if he didn't pull his hamstring and so on. But Tomlin, after the game, even though his team won, was very critical of Pittsburgh, saying they had a JV performance. He was not very impressed with the performance. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers may have also suffered a big loss in losing Bud Dupree. They think he will be out for the year with a torn ACL, so that'll be a big loss for the Pittsburgh defense. But yeah, like I said, this game was very ugly. It was not a very great offensive game. It just honestly just raised questions for both teams even more, especially since they're both going in two different directions. Obviously, we understand this game was affected by COVID. Baltimore kept having continuous positive tests, which kept pushing the game back. And then moving into Wednesday was actually able to get them some running backs back, but Lamar clearly was still not going to be able to play, so he didn't play in this game. And a lot of people were very critical of them playing this game because of the fact that you had the test. Obviously, we know we're in kind of the second wave of COVID as COVID's hitting peaks again, and a lot of stuff's happening and etc. So the NFL came out and defended their decision to play this game, thinking that there was no further risk for infection. They because everybody was very critical, and I think the reason why they were more critical of the NFL also was because, again, of the fact of what happened with Denver. And the fact that, their quarterbacks got all COVID, yet you said you got to play this game. And then here, with this game, you did everything in your power to make sure Baltimore could play and to have this game, even as late as it was into the year, which now has forced Pittsburgh and Baltimore's games to be moved back, I believe, till Monday. I think they both play Monday Night Football. So we'll have 3 games on Monday. So we're going to have games, obviously on Sunday. Then we're going to have our 3 games on Monday. And we're still, and I believe, I'm not 100% sure. I need to check, which I'll do, in that case in point. But, we'll see what happens with the Sunday games. And so on and so forth. So, I'm going to talk about Pittsburgh first. So, Pitt's, undefeated, 11-0. But they don't feel like, I'll say this. Most teams that are undefeated, you usually would think, if they're undefeated, they must be dominant. That's the first thing you think of an undefeated team, a dominant team. Well, Pittsburgh really hasn't been that. They haven't really been a dominant team. They've been a team that has just won all of their games to me. They've had some good performances, but those were against lesser teams. And then they've played against some good teams, and they were able to come out with victories. But then they've also played against bad teams, and they struggled to win. And so they're clearly not a team that consistently plays at a high level, especially offensively. Defensively, their defense shows up every week. You could never say that Pittsburgh's defense never shows up. They show up. It's the offense, to me, that I think is the most inconsistent on this team. Big Ben hasn't had the turnovers that he has, but at the same time, he hasn't had the same explosive offense. Pittsburgh's offense has the potential to be, I think, a very good offense, an explosive offense. They have wide receivers. They have a committee of running backs they like. They have one of the better offensive lines in the league. It's not like this team is void of offensive talent. And with Big Ben back in the fold, obviously they were 8-8 without him. Now you're 11-0 with him, which you would think, okay, that makes sense, right? Top tier defense, some weapons. But yeah, it just still doesn't feel like a dominant, undefeated team. And, people are wondering, is Pittsburgh going to go 16-0? Now, earlier this season, they've already came out and said, hey, our goal isn't to go 16-0. They're just trying to get better week to week. That's what they said. If you look at their remaining schedule, they play Washington, Buffalo, the Bengals, the Colts, and the Browns. I would think everybody would agree on the schedule. Their toughest game left is the Bills. The Bills will be the game everybody would think if they don't lose that game, very high possibility they're going to defeat it because they should beat the Bengals, they should beat Washington, and the Browns have not done good against really good teams. So you would think, well, they play 3 winning teams left, but and then the Colts are a wild card team in that picture. Like they could maybe beat Pittsburgh, but you would think Bills are the best chance. And so they like I said, they're in a position right now where they could go undefeated, and they could be in a good spot. We'll have to see what all happens with this team because they're undefeated. They're playing really good defensive football, I'll say. And offensively, they're doing just enough. But like I said, Mike Tomlin had every reason to be mad about the performance of his team after this game. Like I said, they did not play very well at all. And listen, I think one thing we have to look at, too, is Pittsburgh could be the first team, if they did finish 16-0, people will still think they're fraudulent 16-0. You would think there's no way you can win 16 straight games and be fraudulent. But I think some people would actually have that argument. They would say, well, they just survived a lot of games. It's not like they sat here and just beat teams and you just knew. Like New England, when they went undefeated all the way to the Super Bowl, you knew they were the best team as a 16-0 team. They dominated people. Left every week, they were dominating a new team. Where Pittsburgh's not doing that. And, Pittsburgh has always had that, roller coaster of a team where they play down to their competition and then they'll play up for big competition. And they're always like, well, why are they so inconsistent? And now Baltimore in the second time around isn't what they played the first time with the full healthy roster, with Lamar Jackson and all of those guys. And you may sit here and say, okay, clearly Baltimore's better then. That was a game where they were dominated by Baltimore statistically, but still won because of Lamar Jackson's turnovers. Where in this game, they were down 2 wide receivers. They were down a quarterback. They were down a running back. They were down, multiple players on the offensive end. And squeaked out a 5-point victory. Hanging on. And so, definitely a good reason why people sit here and question Pittsburgh. But listen, they're 11-0. They're still the number 1 seed in the AFC. Literally, Pittsburgh, all they got to do is win out, and they'll probably get it. They'll get the number 1 seed. They could maybe lose a game and still get it. We'll have to see. I don't know if Kansas City's going to lose another game for the rest of the year, but basically they're sitting in a really good spot right now. They're sitting in a really, really good spot right now, record-wise and bye-week-wise. And I also think, I've also said this before, I think the NFL is really not trying to have that 8th team. That's why they're going to the lengths they go to play the games, because they're really not trying to add the 8th team. They really want to honor the playoffs, give the first seed the bye week, because if they added that 8th playoff team, now there's no bye weeks. So now it doesn't matter if you're the best record or the worst record you're playing the first week. And so I'm sure they'll feel like, well, you know, if that's the case, we might need to go ahead, maybe sit some guys later in the season, but we'll have to see. And then we got to talk about Baltimore. Clearly started the season undefeated, 5-0, I believe. Now they're 5-4 on the season, I believe. I think that is the record currently. They're 5-4. They're 6-5. My bad. I knew that didn't sound right. They're 6-5, and they're free falling right now. They've lost 3 straight. Play calling, people say their play calling is horrendous. Offense is predictable, and I've said this for the longest time, and I will continue to say this. To me, they have no big play receivers. They have no receivers that you can go out and say, yeah, these guys right here. They don't have any of them. And so I feel like that affects them in the passing game. Like I said, their play calling is not that good, it feels like. It feels like they've honestly always had a simplistic offense with Lamar Jackson. And the thing is now, with simplistic offenses, is that they're not complex to figure out. So once you figure it out, you know how to defend it. And I think the league has kept up to the Baltimore offense, and they know how to defend it. And now that's why Lamar and the offense is not as effective as they were. And I think that's why they're going on this free fall. There's still a chance. They're still right in the race. They're only a game behind the Colts and the Dolphins for a wild card spot. But their fortunes have to change fast. They have to start winning some games here. Lamar will more than likely be back next week, and they're going to need him. They're going to need him because they play the Cowboys, who you would think, since that game was moved to Tuesday, actually, Tuesday at 8:05, they'll play the Cowboys. You would think, okay, they should beat the I mean, listen, you know, the Cowboys, you know, we've gotten on there the entire year, but if the Ravens lose to the Cowboys, it's not that might be the breaking point of the season for them. But they play the Cowboys, they play the Browns. That could go either way. Because I don't think the Browns, even though the offense in Baker Mayfield hasn't seemed great, they're not the exact same team week 1 to week 14 when they play. Plus, you know what I'm saying, Baltimore clearly isn't the same team they played in week 1 as well. Jags, Giants, Bengals. They have 3 games at the end of the schedule where you would think, okay, they can win 3 games. The Giants games will be tough, but they could win 3, 4, 5. They could honestly win all 5 of these games and then finish 11-5, and then they'll be fine. But with the way they're playing, we don't know what we're going to get from the Baltimore Ravens, and that's concerning. To start the season the way they did, and then now potentially not even make the playoffs, and after winning MVP for Lamar Jackson, after making it to the playoffs last year, being the number 1 seed, that would be a huge disappointment. And I think Baltimore would have to go into the offseason really looking at what is the direction of this team? How can we get over the hump? So that's going to be the big question, I think, for them moving forward. We're going to have to see how it goes, and we're going to have to see what they come up with. So hopefully things work out. Hopefully things go well, and they can rebound. But both teams right now are going in 2 different directions, but still have major questions. But coming up next, we're going to get into the Week 13 predictions right here on the GSMC Football Podcast. So stay tuned.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the recap of the Baltimore-Pittsburgh game where Pittsburgh won 19-14. Very ugly game, very ugly performance for both teams. Baltimore expected because of all the people who were out and then playing against one of the best defenses in the NFL. Pittsburgh offensively really struggled against the Ravens. Ravens have a very good defense, no doubt, but this would be a game that you would think they should dominate with them being at full strength and them not being, and they didn't. Mike Tomlin called them out after the game. And we'll have to see. There's going to be questions lingering around Pittsburgh the whole year as long as they continue to play games like this, and that's why people will never fully be able to get behind them as champions or as title contenders who could beat Kansas City. But now we have officially closed the door on Week 12, and we can now progress forward to Week 13, which we will do here, talking about all the biggest games of Week 13, which basically is every game, because every NFL game is important, no matter, unless it's, even if there's the two worst teams, because you're battling for the first overall draft pick. So there's also some motivation there. But we're going to go ahead and get into the games. You know what I do here. Talk about all the games, analyze, discuss, predict. Simple enough. So let's go into the first game. We have the Miami Dolphins versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, this game originally was supposed to be Tua versus Burrow, 1 versus 5, big rookie quarterback matchup. But as we know, Joe Burrow is out for the year with a torn ACL. So, now you have a Bengals team where, at least with Burrow, they were interesting because of Burrow. They could have been more competitive because of Burrow. Now, without their starting guy, I don't know if they're going to win another game for the rest of the year. They've struggled offensively with Burrow gone. And Miami's coming into this game after having that disappointing loss to Denver. Came back against the Jets, won the game, an impressive victory. Tua will be back this week. And it will be interesting to see how he looks with the thumb injury that he sustained last week, what kept him from playing. Miami is 11.5 point favorite. So clearly, the sports bettors think they're going to probably be able to win this game handily against Cincinnati, which you would look at the two teams on paper, yes, you would think so. Miami has one of the better defenses in the league, and offensively, yes, they aren't statistically really good. They can make plays when needed. So you would think this should be a game Miami should be able to handle from start to finish, especially with the quarterback troubles of Cincinnati. Plus, Miami needs this game to go to 8-4, firmly put themselves in the wild card. We'll see what happens with Baltimore and Las Vegas. And we'll see where they go from there. Dolphins are second in the league in points allowed. Honestly, if I had to put something out there, I would do an over and under. Will the Cincinnati get above 18? Would they be able to go above Miami's average in terms of points allowed? That would be a big question for me. But like I said, without Burrow, I don't know if this offense is going to be able to do much. Because I think, honestly, they're as bad as the Jets offense now. The only difference from the Jets offense and the Cincinnati offense with Burrow was Burrow. And I also think Cincinnati has better weapons. It's just it's kind of the opposite on the Jets. The Jets have a good quarterback, but no weapons. So that's why it looks so bad. But in this game, I am clearly going with Miami. I think they're going to pick up the win. And they're going to win the game handily. Next, we have Saints and Falcons, their second matchup of the year 2 weeks ago. The first Taysom Hill game. The Saints basically handled Atlanta. They handled Atlanta. Defensively, they were able to get after Matt Ryan multiple times. I believe they sacked him 6 times. And they dominated the game from start to finish. Falcons defense played well that game, though. It was just, when your offense isn't doing anything, you know how I always say, eventually you're going to break if your offense doesn't do anything to me. Because it's just going out there all the time, going after 3 and outs, or 1 first down drives and just trying to keep stopping a team, eventually they're going to find something. Sean Payton's going to find a way to make some plays. Now, this time, this game's going to land. Now, Falcons are coming off a very dominating performance against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Falcons feel like, especially with Arizona kind of free-falling, still have slim hopes to make the playoffs. So they still, for them, as a team, feel like they're fighting for something. Raheem Morris is fighting to get a chance to be a head coach for a second time. The Saints are only 3-point favorites in this game. They're 2-0. Defensively, they have played lights out since Taysom Hill's been quarterback, and they've played better defensively over the last 5 to 6 weeks also. So, who's going to win this game? Of course, it's easy to sit here and say, okay, the Falcons clearly have the capability of playing against the best. I've always said the Falcons, talent-wise, can play against any team and beat any team to me. I truly believe that. Even with the Raiders, I truly believe it. It's just you don't know what kind of Falcon team you're going to get. They can either lay an egg or they're going to come out and they're going to put on the type of game where, because you don't look at the Falcons if they were able to beat a tough team and say that's surprising. Bat has a good game, and Julio has a big game, and Calvin really has a good game. It's not like they have no defensive talent or nothing. I mean, we'll have to see. Julio basically outside of the first half did not play the second half. He did not play last week. We'll see if he'll play this week. Calvin Ridley is hurt. They have a lot of injuries on the wide receiving core. That's been their most banged up area for Atlanta. But I think Atlanta's going to be able to come bounce back this week and get the win back. I think they're going to tie the series up 1-1 for the season. And I think they're going to win this game and give the New Orleans their first loss, I believe, since week 4. So, I think the Falcons are going to be able to bounce back from that. So, next game, we have the Cleveland Browns versus the Tennessee Titans. This is going to be a very interesting game. Tennessee seems like they're getting back to where they were last year. Big plays in the passing game with Tannehill and A.J. Brown. Derrick Henry running all over defenses. They look to be playing better after that stretch where they lost 3 straight. You're like, well, what's going on with Tennessee? Why are they struggling? Why are they not playing well? Why are they laying cupcakes? I mean, they're laying eggs. They're playing well. Cleveland, we know what Cleveland is. A good defensive team that can run the football, but is very limited with Baker Mayfield. When Baker Mayfield's under pressure, he struggles tremendously. And really just overall, if you've watched Cleveland, their passing offense has not been that great. So, we'll have to see how they come out. Because here's the thing. Cleveland's offensive line is better than last year. They're going against a Tennessee team where if you had to talk about their weakness on the defensive side, would be their pass rush. So maybe this could present an opportunity for Baker to get more time in the pocket and make something happen. I think they're going to win this game. If Cleveland was to win this game, they would need Baker to have a better than what he's done the last 3 weeks kind of game. Doesn't mean he has to throw for 400 yards. But just be efficient, make the throws when they're there, get a couple of touchdowns. You know what I'm saying? You already know both teams want to run the football. Physical teams. But, I mean, let's be honest. You probably would trust Ryan Tannehill more to make a big play with the passing game than Baker Mayfield. And that could be what the difference in this game is. And that's what I'm predicting will be the difference in this game. And why I'm going with Tennessee to win, because I just think we know Tannehill can make plays in this offense. We've seen it for literally now a year and a half. A full season and a half. Baker, it's like, unless it's just a cupcake and given to her, then, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know, Baker. So, we'll have to see. But, I'm going with Tennessee in this game to win and to continue their hot streak. They've started to get on again. And the next game, we have Colts and Texans. Texans are playing some really good football. They're playing better. They've won, I believe, 2-3 straight games. Indianapolis, coming off a loss to Titans, not look really good last week. They really were dominated. And that kind of shocked a lot of people. Colts have really been a very good defense the whole year. And last week, they just looked like they had no answer for Derrick Henry. They had no answer for the passing game. Like I said, Deshaun Watson in Houston. Listen, again, with how the playoffs are looking, they still have a chance to squeak into the playoffs right now. And so they're still feeling like, hey, we have something to fight for. Like I said, offensively, they're starting to play better, even though they've lost probably their best receiver, Will Fuller, for the rest of the year. So that's going to put more on Brandon Cook's shoulders and Kenny Steele's. But, listen, the Colts are currently sitting in the wild card spot. They lose this game. Not only do they lose leverage, Houston gets a game closer. And we'll have to see what happens with Baltimore and Las Vegas. But the Colts are kind of under some pressure. They're kind of they're that team who is in, but if they lose, they could easily be out. So we'll have to see how that all turns out and how it goes. But I'm going to go with the Colts to win. I think they're going to be able to come out with a good victory. I think the loss of Will Fuller at Houston is going to hurt them a lot because he was really their big play guy. And so without him, I don't know where Houston gets their big plays from. Then you have Minnesota and Jacksonville. Minnesota 10-point favorites. Jacksonville, they've been competitive. They've lost, but they've been competitive. They've been very competitive these last few weeks. So I don't think Minnesota should expect this game to be a walk-in, but they're playing much better. Minnesota has a chance to make the playoffs after starting off the season the way they did. People thought they were about to sell ship, sell parts, and it was done. But they're playing well, and they're back in it. And they win this game, now they're back at 500. Like I said, if Arizona loses, and then they could play the Rams next week, they'll be tied at 6-6 apiece for the wild card. So Minnesota, credit to Mike Zimmer. People thought this could have been Mike Zimmer's last year because of everything that happened. Getting this team back on track, establishing, again, the Dalvin Cook running game. Defense is playing much better. Kirk Cousins has actually played a little bit better these last couple of weeks as well. And it's getting them in a position where they could still make the playoffs and make something happen. So, listen, we're going to have to see how it all turns out, how it goes. And I'm excited to see if Minnesota maybe can make that run to get into the playoffs. Next, we have Bears and Lions. Lions just fired head coach Matt Patricia after that disappointing Thanksgiving performance. The Bears coming off a disappointing game. Green Bay getting destroyed on Sunday Night Football. Bears are favored in this game. But it's a game of two teams that are just going down the drain. Chicago still has a chance to make playoffs just because they started the season so well. But the way they're playing, it still just feels like it's a long shot that it probably won't happen. And so we'll have to see if potentially that could happen. If potentially they could get in. I don't know if Nick Foles is going to be back this week. I don't know if it's going to be Mitchell. It could be Mitchell again. Detroit, they haven't had two of their best offensive players the last couple weeks. They haven't had DeAndre Swift or Kenny Golladay. We don't know if they're going to be back this week. We would expect DeAndre Swift to get out of concussion protocol, be back this week. Kenny Golladay, still a game time decision and questionable. We'll have to see what it looks like. But if I had to make a prediction in this game of who I think will win the game, honestly, I'm not comfortable with anybody in this game. But I guess I'll go with Chicago just because we know defensively they can really put it on you. Detroit can struggle offensively, and if they do that, I think their offense could make enough plays to win this game. And so that's why I'm going with Chicago. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to finish out the Week 13 predictions in the NFL. So stay tuned for that.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Before I continue on with my Week 13 predictions, I just remind you guys, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. That's GSMC_football. We can interact about everything football there, talk about things, give comments, reactions, have fun, just interact with us, man. We love talking to you guys, definitely, on the GSMC Twitter. So don't forget to do that. Reminder, last time, third time's the charm. GSMC_football. But let's get back into the Week 13 predictions. So, in our next game, we have the Las Vegas Raiders versus the New York Jets. Jets look like the worst team in, well, actually, no, they are the worst team in football. Let's just be completely honest. They are a hot mess. Las Vegas, coming off of last week's blowout to Atlanta, just getting blown out, not being able to establish anything, turnovers, fumbles. If I'm John Gruden, I'm angry. And if I'm Las Vegas, I'm angry. Because we got embarrassed last week. And what a perfect medicine, but to have the Jets come into town, or you're going to New York. But still, what a clock game. I understand West Coast, but listen, this is the week to establish yourself again. Remind yourself who you are. I expect Las Vegas to come out and run it down the Jets' throat. I expect Josh Jacobs to get 20-plus carries. Because they need to establish what got them to where they were at 6-4. That got them within plays, literally, of beating the Chiefs for a second time this season. Because last week's team was just like, what was that? And the thing about Las Vegas is they really, the whole year has played as much as possible consistency to where they were, or who they are. But last week was just so uncharacteristic. And so I think they're going to go out, they're going to dominate the Jets, they're going to be physical, they're going to hit them in the mouth, and I think they're going to win. I think it's as simple as that. I don't think the Jets can provide much resistance. And I think they're going to be able to rebound from last week. And even though the bettors say this game is a 10-point favorite for one team, this is a game that I think everybody should pay attention to. The Giants and the Seahawks, because the Giants are won 3 straight. They have a good defense. Now, it's expected they won't have Daniel Jones. So I can understand, again, why the point differential is where it is. But I would not be surprised if this is a close game into the fourth quarter. The Giants do have a good defense that I think with Seattle offensively, they have not been as dynamic as they were to start the season. So they're not lighting teams up for almost 30 plus, even though they still score a lot of points. So I think the Giants will keep it competitive. But I think, especially with Daniel Jones probably not playing, I just think they're going to be able to eventually get enough plays. This may be another DK Metcalf game where he has a big game. And I think they're going to be able to win it because of that reason. If Daniel Jones was in this game, this might be a game I would even sit here and say could be the upset of the week. But with him out potentially for a couple of games, I don't see the Giants having enough offensive firepower to really just be able to keep. Like, I think you might go into that half it being 13-16 or 10-16. And then the second half, you might end the game 30-7, 33-17 or 36-17. But you got to think about it. It was a 6-point game at half. It's just, again, the Giants don't have a lot of offense. They don't even average 20 points a game this season. So, if they hit their average, I mean, that's what they hit. But Seattle, they average 31 points a game. That's still a whole 11, 12 points more. So, definitely going to take Seattle in this game to win. I think they're the better team, clearly. And I think they're just going to make enough plays late to win. But I think the Giants are going to keep it competitive close. Then we have Rams and Cardinals. Rams are 3-point favorites. Both teams coming off disappointing losses last week. The Cardinals coming off that Patriot loss, an ugly game, offensively could not do anything. But I think we're not talking enough about that injury. Kyler Murray, ever since that injury, has not looked like the same dynamic thrower of the football. I feel like when I watched that game with New England last week, some of the play calls to me, it kind of felt like they were doing a lot of up the middle. Like the Cardinals are a team to me when they run with the speed, especially with Kyler Murray. They like to get outside, and they really didn't. They just kept going up the middle in New England. They didn't really have any dynamic plays in the passing game last week, and I think it's really because of Kyler and his injury. And I think it's limiting them offensively because they don't want Kyler to potentially risk injuring it further, so they're not trying to say, hey, we need you to throw it 40 times all over the field. We're going to give you, quick throws, short throws, and try to be more of a physical running football team with Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, but I think that's limiting what they can do offensively because I don't think that's the kind of team they are. And I think New England exposed that last week. Where the Rams, their biggest thing is Jared Goff. If Jared Goff plays well, they usually win because defensively they're good. They're very good, probably a playoff defense. They have 3 running backs. But if Jared Goff just starts turning the ball over left and right, we know how that goes for them. It's literally just if Jared Goff plays well, the Rams probably will win. If he plays bad, they'll probably lose. Because he has very up and down performances. Very, very up and down performances week to week. Now, this is a game, again, where I think the Rams defense could potentially be a big factor in this game. They could potentially come out here, really handle the Cardinals' offensive line. And especially, again, with Murray, we got to see where he is with his injury. Maybe not trying to take certain hits. Got Darnold in his face. You might see still somewhat of a conservative game plan from Arizona this week. And, with Sean McVay, he called out Jared Goff after this past week's game with all the turnovers. Usually he doesn't do that. He did that first time for a change. So clearly he's just like, Jared, listen, man, it's not the team, it's you. If we lose, it's you. It's not the team. When we lost to Miami, it wasn't the team, it was you. And so he's like, listen, you got to play better. You have to play better if we're going to win. And so we'll see how Jared Goff responds to that. I think he'll respond well. Again, Sean McVay knows to be successful, he can't sit here and say we're just going to run it all the time and basically do it the Cleveland offense. He knows he's still going to have to chuck the ball. And so he's like, hey, Jared, we're going to call your number and we need you to play better. So I'm going to go with the Rams in this game. I think the Cardinals, with Kyler Murray not playing as well as he has, I just don't know if he's going to be able to really be the guy that we have all, expected him and hoped he would be. And we'll have to see if he can get fully healthy. Then we have Eagles and Packers. Green Bay coming off that blowout. I think they're going to get another blowout this week. I think the Eagles, you saw on Monday Night Football, offensively, they're a mess. Wentz is just terrible this year. Offensive line cannot block. They just don't have the weapons. It's just it's not good. If you're a Philadelphia fan, you're just so frustrated with what you're seeing because it's just like what is this? This is a shell of a team. Usually, last year when they were in this situation, they figured out Wentz still play well. They were able to make enough plays to win games. Now it's just like they're not making any plays to win games. And defensively, their defense isn't even that terrible, but it's just when you have your offense continuously turning the ball over, having consistent 3-and-outs, how are you really as a defense supposed to go in every game still saying, listen, it's one thing if a defense thinks, okay, if we limit them to 20 points, I think our offense can give us 21. I don't know if Philadelphia's defense can sit here and say, if we limit them to 20, 17 points, I still don't know if our offense is even going to get over 10. And I think that could sometimes mess with the psyche of a defense. And so I'm going to go with Green Bay to go out here, probably have another dominating performance like they did against Chicago, and the Eagles' free fall to continue. In the next game, we have Chargers and the Patriots. Patriots are a game away from 500. Now, there isn't an odd on this game. Apparently, it's very even between the two teams. We know the Chargers' disappointing season. Justin Herbert has been the ray of sunshine, knowing that they have their franchise quarterback, but they've struggled to win. They've lost a lot of close games. New England has shown still very well coached. Passing game, very limited. You saw Cam only had 68 yards. But they're a running football team who defensively will keep them in games. And so we're going to have to see how that, with these two styles contrast this week. New England's still in the playoff picture as well. That'd be kind of crazy if they were able to sneak in, right? And I think they're going to get another win this week. I think they're going to go to 6-6. I think it's going to be another ugly game. I don't think Justin Herbert, usually when Belichick goes against rookie quarterbacks, he's usually able to have his way and usually able to pretty much sometimes give rookie quarterbacks the worst game of the year. And the next game, you have Kansas City and Denver, a 14-point spread. I mean, Denver, we saw they don't have much offense. We know about the quarterback situation. Even with Drew Lock, I don't think they're going to be able to score enough to even stay in this game. Their defense has played well, but last time they played, they literally got destroyed. And I think this is at Kansas City. I think it's going to happen again. I think Kansas City's just hitting on all cylinders right now, and I think it's going to continue in the Sunday night game, and I think they're going to win very handily over the Denver Broncos. Then we have the Monday night game, the first Monday night game at 5 o'clock. The Pittsburgh Steelers go against the Washington football team. Now, I told you earlier in their schedule that, okay, yeah, Pittsburgh probably going to beat Washington, right? Oh, why did I say that? My bad. The Washington football team. Sometimes it just rolls off the tongue. The Washington football team. Wait, I said it right. I didn't say it. Okay, never mind. Sorry. Things happen on the podcast. But, so the Washington football team could have a sneaky, listen, Alex Smith is a guy who's going to throw a lot of short passes. He's not going to throw for 350 a lot. But he's efficient. He usually makes the right throws. They're going to methodically move the ball down the field. They have a running game. Pittsburgh knows what they're going against. And listen, they play down the competition. But I don't know if you want to play down to Washington, because Washington, if they can get a couple of plays on you, they have one of the better front sevens. They can get after Big Ben. Pittsburgh better come out in this game playing much, much better than they played. Because potential upset alert. And I always feel like these Monday night primetime, Thursday night primetime games are more prone to upsets. Especially with Pittsburgh coming on a short week. And basically Washington getting an extra day of prep. Then we have Buffalo and San Fran. As the real Monday night game, we have Nick Mullens versus Josh Allen. I think Buffalo's going to win this game. I think Buffalo's going to come out, play the game the right way, dominate on the defensive end. And I think, San Fran still can potentially make the playoffs. But I just think the Bills know they got to keep winning. Miami's on their tail. They're playing good football. Like I said, Monday night game. I think coming off that good win over the Chargers last week, I think they're going to come out, have another impressive performance. I think it's going to be a close game, though. I'm not saying this is a blowout. I think it's going to be a close game to the end, but I think Josh Allen and the Bills will pull it out. And in the last game, we have Cowboys and Ravens. Tuesday night game, 8 up on Fox. Currently, Baltimore is a 7-point favorite at this very second. We'll see what the line looks like going into that game. But if I'm Baltimore, this is a must-win. And I'm going to pick them to win because this is a must-win. You lose this game, what does the locker room look like? We're 6-6. We're free-falling. These free falls really test locker rooms, and it's going to be really testing for Baltimore if they lose this game. So they need this game. They need it, and I think they're going to get it. And those are your Week 13 predictions right here on the GSMC Football Podcast. That's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get to the biggest college games of the week, plus other NFL news. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we wrapped up all of my Week 13 predictions, give my predictions on all the games and why I think somebody was going to win and why somebody was going to lose. Also, one more reminder, guys, don't forget to follow us on social media on Twitter at GSMC_football. Also, don't forget, whatever platform you're listening to us on, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Definitely appreciate it. Appreciate any feedback, how I can be a better host for you guys. Definitely appreciate all of that. So, do not forget to do that. Because we're available on any podcast platform. As whatever platform you're listening to us on, as you know. But, so, now we're going to get to the biggest college games of the week, baby. And so we're going to get into the first game. Doesn't seem like a big game maybe on paper, but to me, it's a good game. You have number 5, Texas A&M, one game out of the college football playoff, going against 5-3 Auburn, who has had a very disappointing year by all stretch of the imagination. Auburn was expected to be a more competitive year with Bo Nix in the second year, and it feels like their offense is the exact same, very inconsistent, struggles in the passing game, and then I think their defense is letting them down as well, as obviously, as we know, they lost a lot of their top defensive guys in the draft. Trying to replace them sometimes can be difficult. It always, like I said, it feels like Auburn has these up and down years. They have a good year, a bad year, good year, bad year. Usually, even in the years that are decent years, they are able to beat a really good team. Maybe this is the week. But we haven't seen anything that shows it. But, Texas A&M are 7-point favorites. And like I said, Texas A&M's in that 5th spot. I always like to call it the waiting spot. The spot of, basically, if they do what they need to do, if they play and they win out, it's literally just on the top 4 teams. If someone loses, depending on who it is, they could get it. Like, if Notre Dame loses to Clemson, now you got to look at that, at their committee, and say, well, who do we think is more impressive? Because they both have one loss. One loss to Alabama, one loss to Clemson. Though you could say Notre Dame beat Clemson. But Texas A&M beat Florida, who's number 6. So, we'll have to see how it looks. We'll have to see how it looks. But in this game, I think, like I said, Texas A&M's going to win. I think they come out. They're going to dominate. And, I think Jimbo Fisher has got these guys at a good position right now. And like I told him, they're at that waiting position right now. This is their last game of the season. They know if we beat these guys, after that, it's on everybody else to see what happens. Unless somehow Alabama falters down the stretch. And then the other big game. Indiana and Wisconsin, 12-16. Both teams coming off a loss. Wisconsin coming off an upset loss to Northwestern, who now sits here as potentially the second best team in the Big Ten. Indiana coming off a loss to Ohio State. We're getting destroyed early, but came back and made it competitive late. Had over 500 yards passing. And I think it showed the fight and the will of that team. And so definitely for sure, you look at these two teams and you think to yourself, man, this is going to be a very grinded out game. Overall, Big Ten play, really the whole college season, every team and every conference, it feels like we're having a down year in college football. Like, the teams that we thought were going to be good aren't good, and then the teams that we thought were going to be dominant are winning, but are winning a lot of close games. You're kind of having some questions. Outside of Alabama, it seems like it doesn't matter what happens, they're going to be Alabama. Teams are just kind of like, okay. I mean, it gives chances for teams that maybe weren't viewed as highly to have a chance, but like I said, Indiana might finish the season with one loss. Wisconsin might finish the season with one loss, but yet, maybe before a regular 12-game stretch, hey, make you a top 10 team, or now it's like they may not even crack the top 10. So, if I had to predict a winner in this game, I go with Indiana. I think Indiana has a more dynamic passing. And Wisconsin's weakness, what has Wisconsin's weakness been in previous years? they don't really have they've never had a great passing attack. They've always been solid defensively, solid on the ground, and then they expect to get just enough in the passing game. Where Indiana, we know they can make plays. Now, I believe they did lose their quarterback, Phoenix. So we'll have to see where they are. Because Tuttle's going to have to come in there and be the guy. But I think Indiana's going to get a good win this week. And, still we'll look at this season as a success just because a lot of people did not see them there in this position and where they are right now. And then in another big game, we are actually going to have the Alabama-LSU game played. Now, a lot of people expect this to be a blowout. Alabama's is basically a 30-point favorite. 29.5 to be exact. LSU, I think this year, obviously lost basically all their starters from last year's team, especially in the offense. They lost every starter. Offensively, they still play well. It's just this LSU defense has been absolutely terrible this year. Alabama's defense has been questionable at times, but they've gotten better. They're probably never going to be dominant, but they've gotten to a point where they're good enough to win. And then that offense with Mac Jones. They're just able to drop 40 on anybody. Devontae Smith, you would think Eric Waddle being out, okay, we can double cover Deontay Smith. Maybe it can make it a little bit more difficult. Nope. Deontay Smith's putting up even greater numbers, it feels like, with Waddle out. And I don't see how LSU, with the defense in that secondary, can stop. So I think Alabama's going to easily roll this game and win. Then you have USC. And the reason why I'm talking about USC is just because they're undefeated and they're considerably maybe the only Pac-12 team left that can legitimately have a shot to make the college football playoff. Now, they did rank them 20 in the college football playoff rankings this week. So you would think, well, they have a bit of a journey to go down, to get there. And they only have one game left against the Bruins. But again, as we know, the college football playoff is going to be very subjective. And they're probably not going to allow that to happen, but they could finish the season 5-0 and be undefeated. And then if they have a Big 12 championship game, maybe go 6-0. And then maybe that might even be a chance that they maybe play Oregon in there, something like that. So we'll have to see. But, I mean, I got USC winning their game against Washington State. But they probably have to start winning in a more dominant fashion if they really want to make an impression on the committee. And those are your biggest college football games of the week. So that's that. So let's go get to some NFL news. So Jaguars have fired their GM, Dave Caldwell, after a 1-10 start. The Jags basically gutted whatever was left of the roster from the AFC Championship game a few years ago against New England. Expectations coming into this year was definitely they were not going to be a good team. I think that was widely expected. It was not shocking. And I feel like it was one of those years, I think this happens sometimes, where a team knows they're going to move on from a regime, but they need their regime there for another year. Because maybe with Trevor Lawrence coming into the draft, they said, listen, why try to have a new head coach that's going to maybe try to win now, when maybe we could keep who we have, gut the roster, have a losing season, potentially get in the mix to get the top quarterback in the draft, and then go from there. Because they have a big quarterback issue. They have some decent receivers. They have some guys they like. But we know Jacksonville's biggest issue throughout their entire franchise history, outside of a few years, is that they've usually struggled to have the adequate talent to be competitive. And, Jacksonville's not a bad city. It's not like they're in a blizzard or they're in a city where it's just like, oh, nobody wants to play here. In Jacksonville, sunny Florida beach. It's Jacksonville. But it's just they're not a very appealing team. Remember, they're the only team, I believe, that has a pool in their stadium because of the fact that they have to do a little bit more to get fans to come to their games. But they fired David Caldwell. I expect Doug Marrone to be gone after this year, too. I expect them to let them go as well. And with Trevor Lawrence coming in, I definitely expect him to have a new regime, a new staff, and everything coming in this year. And speaking of GMs and head coaches, there are a couple of people who are discussing around the league thinking that in terms of GMs this year, teams that need GMs, there's plenty of really good GMs out there and guys they could go get. But in terms of head coaches, they're okay. They feel like this year you have some good candidates, but you don't have that can't miss candidate. You don't have that young guy that you just say we have to get him. You don't have really a Kyle Shanahan or McVay in this year's head coaching class, you could say, that potentially is being talked about. Obviously, we know about Eric Bellamy. I know about Joe Brady as two guys that people are looking at as a potential head coach. Maybe some guys that have been on, Dan Quinn, he's gotten interest from some teams in college and professional. We don't know about head coach, but, we got some interest there. So I can see why execs think, from a general manager, we could get you a very good general manager, a very strong-minded general manager, a guy who can, lead the team. But from a head coaching perspective, you may only be able to settle for a good candidate, depending on who a team zeroes in on as the best candidate for them. And so it really just depends on who they think is best for that situation, who's best for that equation. So we would just have to see who at the end of the day they think is best overall, and so on and so forth. But, back to the Jaguars. Listen. When Jacksonville gets their QB, because remember, even when they went to the AFC Championship game, not a lot of people were sold on Blake Bortles. They didn't have a guy that you were just like, yeah, he's the guy. Or even in a Jared Goff situation where he's played very well, and he's just inconsistent. It's just, I think Jacksonville realizes, listen, if the Jets really do lose all their games, we're not getting him. I think more people are starting to believe that they're going to go with Trevor Lawrence for sure, and Sam Darnold will definitely be on the trade market. So they may be looking very closely at Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields, because a lot of people are now projecting that Fields and Lawrence will go 1 and 2 in this draft, because both teams at the top will need quarterbacks. And I think Justin Fields will be a very good fit for Jacksonville. I think for what they would want from him, I think that would be a good fit for them. Like I said, whoever they bring as their new GM and their new head coach, I'm sure, when they interview for it, have a plan. Which quarterback are we taking? What are we going to do? What do we want the image of this football team to be moving forward? And I'm sure they're going to try to get Jacksonville back on the right track. They like I said, they're restocking some talent. They're going to have to get. They're probably going to be a young team next year, and they're going to try to do what they got to do to be successful. So we'll have to see what happens. But that's all the time we have here on the podcast. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you for letting me be part of your day. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. This is your host, Brice, saying have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.